The night was quiet, too quiet. The small cabin stood alone at the edge of the forest where no neighbors lived for miles. Only the sound of crickets and the wind in the trees filled the darkness. Inside the cabin, a man named David was trying to sleep. He had worked all day fixing fences, cutting wood, and feeding his animals. He wanted nothing more than a good night's rest. His dog Max slept at the foot of the bed, breathing slow and steady. But suddenly, Max's ears twitched. His head lifted and a low growl came from his throat. David opened his eyes, confused. He trusted Max more than anyone. The dog never growled unless something was wrong. David sat up in bed, listening. At first, he thought it was just the wind. Then he heard it something faint, something strange. It was not the cry of an owl or the howl of a wolf. It sounded softer, almost like a child weeping in the dark. David frowned. Who could be out there in the middle of the night? No children lived nearby. The closest house was 10 miles away. Max barked sharply, his body tense, eyes fixed on the window. The sound came again, a broken sob drifting through the trees. David felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. It did not sound human, but it did not sound animal either. It was something in between, something he could not explain. He got out of bed, pulled on his boots, and grabbed the old flashlight that hung by the door. Max was already there, tail stiff, ready to go. David opened the door, and the cold night air rushed in. The forest looked dark and endless, the moon hidden behind heavy clouds. He clicked on the flashlight, its weak beam cutting a narrow path through the shadows. "Stay close," David whispered to Max, though he knew the dog needed no command. Max trotted ahead, nose low to the ground, ears alert. David followed, his boots crunching softly on the dirt path. The sound came again clearer this time. It was closer, and it made David's chest tighten. The cry was sad, almost painful, like something lost and afraid. They walked deeper into the forest. Every step seemed louder than the last, every rustle of leaves sending a shiver down his spine. David told himself it could be a lost animal, maybe a wounded deer or a stray dog. But deep down, he felt it was something else, something unknown. The forest seemed alive, watching him, waiting for him to discover what hid in its shadows. Max suddenly stopped. His body went stiff, his ears pointed forward. A low growl rumbled in his chest. David raised the flashlight and pointed it into the tall grass ahead. For a moment, he saw nothing, only the dark shapes of trees and the shifting shadows of leaves. Then the grass moved. Something small crouched there, trembling. David's heart pounded. He took a cautious step forward. "Hello," he called softly. His voice sounded strange in the heavy night air. The thing in the grass whimpered, a sound both familiar and alien. David felt torn between fear and curiosity. He lowered the light, trying not to scare it, and crouched down slowly. The figure moved, and the light fell on a face. David froze. It looked like a child, but not like any child he had ever seen. Its skin was pale blue, almost glowing faintly in the dark. Its eyes were large, shining like liquid silver. The small body shook with fear. Thin arms wrapped around itself. Max did not bark this time. Instead, he stepped forward carefully, tail lowered, ears twitching. The childlike figure reached out a trembling hand toward the dog as if it trusted him more than the man. David's breath caught in his throat. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Was it real? Was he dreaming? The strange child looked up at him, tears glistening on its cheeks. Its lips moved, and a sound came out, broken words in a voice that was soft but not human. David could not understand the language, but the fear in its tone was clear. This was no wild animal, no trick of the night. This was something else, something from beyond. David's hand shook as he lowered the flashlight. He stared at the glowing child, his mind racing. Why was it here? What was it running from? He glanced at the sky above the trees, half expecting to see something there. But the clouds only shifted silently, hiding the stars. Max pressed closer to the child, his growl fading into a soft whine. David realized then that his loyal dog was not afraid. If Max could trust this strange being, maybe he should too. He took another step forward, kneeling in the grass. "Don't be afraid," David whispered, though he was not sure if the child could understand him. "I won't hurt you." The silver eyes blinked, and for a brief moment the child seemed to relax. But then, from far away, a new sound cut through the night. A deep humming, low and powerful, drifting from the sky. The child's eyes widened with terror. David looked up, his heart racing again. Something was out there, searching, and that was the moment he knew his life would never be the same again. David stood frozen in the dark forest, staring at the strange little figure. The child's silver eyes looked back at him with fear and sadness. Its blue skin glowed faintly, lighting the grass around them. Max, his loyal dog, pressed close to the child as if guarding it. David felt his heart pounding. This was not possible. Children did not fall from the sky. Yet here one was, right in front of him. The child trembled, holding its thin arms tight across its chest. Its lips moved again, whispering sounds that were not English, not any language David had ever heard. Still, the meaning was clear. This child was lost and afraid. David wanted to speak, but no words came. How could he explain what he was seeing? Finally, he crouched lower, trying to make his voice calm. "It's all right," he whispered. "I won't hurt you." The child tilted its head, eyes wide. Slowly, it reached out a hand, small and delicate, glowing faintly at the tips of its fingers. David hesitated, then stretched his own hand forward. For a moment, man and alien child touched. The skin was cool, almost like touching water. A strange warmth spread through David's chest, a feeling of connection he could not explain. Max wagged his tail softly, pressing his nose against the child's hand. The child made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sigh, as if comforted by the animal's trust. David felt a sudden surge of protectiveness. This was not a monster, not a threat. This was a child alone, scared, and far from home. But before he could think of what to do next, a noise broke the silence. Far above the trees came the low hum again, deeper and closer than before. The child's silver eyes widened in terror. It clutched David's sleeve with surprising strength, shaking its head as if to say, "No, don't let them find me." David looked up, his flashlight beams sweeping across the treetops. Clouds shifted, and for a moment he thought he saw bright shapes flickering behind the mist. His chest tightened. Whoever was up there, they were searching. And they were searching for this child. He turned back quickly. "We have to go," he muttered, even though he knew the child might not understand. He lifted the child gently into his arms. It was lighter than he expected, fragile, as if it hadn't eaten in days. The child buried its face against his chest, trembling. Max barked once, sharply, then trotted ahead down the path toward the cabin. David followed quickly, his boots striking the earth. Every step felt heavier. The hum above grew louder, beams of light sweeping across the forest in the distance. Whoever was hunting was getting closer. At last, the cabin came into view. David rushed inside, shutting the door firmly and locking it. He set the child on the old wooden chair near the fireplace. The glow from its skin lit the room faintly, mixing with the orange light of the fire. David crouched in front of the child, his voice steady but firm. "You're safe here," he said. "No one will hurt you." The child looked at him with those strange eyes as if trying to understand. Then, in a broken, halting voice, It spoke a single word: hide. David froze. He had not imagined it. The child had spoken in his language, even if only one word. Max growled softly, his ears twitching. Outside, the sound of the hum grew louder still. A bright flash cut across the window, as if something was scanning the land. David grabbed an old lantern and pulled the rug away from the floor. Beneath it, a hatch led down to a small basement he used for storing tools and food. He lifted the hatch and looked at the child. "Go," he urged. "Down here." The child's hands shook, but it obeyed, climbing down the wooden steps. Max followed closely, tail stiff. David lowered the hatch back into place just as the sound outside stopped. The night became silent again, too silent. Then came a knock at the door. David's chest tightened. The knock was not polite. It was heavy, demanding, echoing through the cabin walls. He stood frozen, unsure if he should answer or stay quiet. The knock came again, louder. "Open," a deep voice called from outside. The word was clear, sharp, and not human. David's hand tightened on the lantern. His mind raced. Should he pretend no one was home? Should he open and face whatever was waiting outside? He glanced at the floor where the child hid below. His heart told him one thing: he had to protect it, no matter the cost. Slowly, he walked to the door. His hand trembled as he reached for the handle. The night outside seemed endless, and the presence beyond the door felt powerful, dangerous. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. He would not let fear control him. He turned the lock and pulled the door open. A tall shadow stood there, eyes glowing in the dark. David stood at the doorway, his lantern light trembling in his hand. A tall figure blocked the night behind it. The creature was taller than any man, with broad shoulders and a long cloak that moved with the wind. Its eyes glowed faintly yellow, fixed on David with a cold stare. For a moment, David could not breathe. He had never seen anything like it. Yet something deep in his chest told him this was connected to the child hiding beneath his floor. The figure leaned closer. Its voice was deep, metallic, and heavy, as if it came from a machine more than a throat. "Human," it said slowly. "Have you seen one of ours? A small one. It is lost." David's mouth went dry. He felt the weight of the words pressing on him. He thought of the child's silver eyes, the way it had clung to him, terrified. He thought of the single word it had spoken: hide. His heart pounded as he forced himself to answer. "No," he said firmly. "I haven't seen anything." The alien tilted its head as if studying his face. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then, slowly, the figure stepped back. "If you lie," it warned, "you will die with it." The words sent a chill through David's bones. He gripped the lantern tighter, watching as the tall figure turned and walked away into the darkness. For a long moment, David stood there, listening to the hum of ships above and the fading footsteps in the grass. Finally, he shut the door and locked it tight. He turned toward the hatch. Max whined softly, pawing at the wooden boards. David pulled the rug aside and opened the hatch. The silver-eyed child looked up at him, trembling. "It's gone," David whispered. "For now?" The child's lips moved, forming broken words. David strained to listen. "Not gone," it said slowly, each syllable heavy. "They come again." David swallowed hard. He could see the fear in the child's glowing eyes. This was not a family searching for their lost young. This was something darker, something dangerous. The hunters would not stop until they found what they were looking for. He helped the child out of the basement and sat it by the fire. The flames flickered across its blue skin, making it glow even brighter. "Who are they?" David asked quietly, though he knew he might not get an answer. The child looked at him for a long moment, then shook its head, unable to explain. But the terror in its eyes told him enough. Whoever those hunters were, they wanted the child for reasons far from kind. Max sat by the door, ears twitching. The cabin felt too small, too fragile against whatever was outside. David knew he had to decide: hand the child over and save himself, or protect it and risk everything. He looked at the child again, so small, so fragile, yet holding on to life with everything it had. His heart made the choice for him. He could not abandon it. The night dragged on, heavy with silence. David tried to stay awake, sitting in his chair, watching the fire burn low. The child curled up on the rug, finally falling into a restless sleep. Max stayed alert, growling at every distant sound. Then, sometime past midnight, a strange glow filled the window. David leaped up, heart racing. Outside, beams of white light swept across the trees, scanning the land like giant fingers searching in the dark. The hum grew louder, so close it shook the cabin walls. David rushed to the window and peered out. 3 tall figures moved through the forest, their glowing eyes cutting through the shadows. They were not alone. Drones floated above them, small. Machines buzzing with sharp lights, scanning the ground. "They're here," David whispered. He turned quickly, grabbing the child's hand. "We have to hide." The child shook its head, eyes wide. "No hide," it said weakly. "They find." The words chilled David. The child was right. These hunters were not ordinary. They had technology far beyond his world. No simple basement would protect them for long. The beams of light drew closer. Shadows stretched long across the cabin walls. Max barked loudly, his fur bristling. David held the child close, his mind racing. He had no weapons, no way to fight. Yet something inside him refused to give up. The knock came again, louder than before, shaking the cabin. "Human?" The deep voice thundered. "We know it is here. Give it to us." David's breath caught. He glanced at the child, whose glowing eyes were filled with terror and trust all at once. He knew then he could not give it up. He whispered to the child, "Stay behind me. Whatever happens, I won't let them take you." The door rattled under another heavy blow. Cracks splintered through the wood. Max growled, teeth bared, ready to defend. David's hands shook, but his resolve hardened. If the hunters wanted the child, they would have to go through him first. The final blow shattered the door. Stepped inside, tall shadows filling the cabin with their glowing eyes and cold voices. And David stood firm, the firelight flickering across his face, ready to make his stand. The cabin shook as the door splintered apart. Wood cracked and fell across the floor. David's heart hammered in his chest as the hunters stepped inside. Their tall bodies filled the small room, their cloaks brushing the ground, their glowing eyes sweeping across the cabin like cold fire. The air seemed heavier with their presence, as if even the night itself bent around them. Max growled fiercely, standing in front of David and the child, teeth bared. The hunters did not flinch. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped forward. Its voice boomed, low and sharp. "Give us the child. It does not belong to you." David swallowed hard. His hand shook, but he held his ground. "I told you," he said slowly. "I haven't seen anything." The hunter tilted its head, the faint yellow glow of its eyes flickering. It moved closer, towering over him. "Human," it said with disdain, "you are weak. You cannot protect it. If you keep it, you die with it." Behind him, the alien child clutched his arm tightly, its silver eyes wide with fear. It whispered something in its broken voice, words David barely understood. Not safe, not family. Killers. David's mind raced. In that moment, the truth became clear. The hunters were not here to save the child. They were here to capture or destroy it. The child's trembling body and desperate eyes told him all he needed to know. This was not a matter of survival. This was a matter of choice. He could hand the child over, save his own life, and end this nightmare. Or he could protect the child, knowing it might cost him everything. The hunters waited, their patience thin. "Choose," the leader said. "Give it to us. Now." The silence in the cabin felt heavy, broken only by Max's growl and the crackle of dying firewood. David's breath came fast and shallow. Every instinct screamed at him to give up, to survive. But when he looked down at the child, fragile yet clinging to him with all its strength, something shifted inside him. He remembered nights alone after his wife passed away. The empty cabin, the quiet meals, the long days with no one but his dog for company. This child, strange and alien though it was, had stirred something he thought was gone: hope, connection, a reason to fight. David straightened his back, meeting the hunter's glowing eyes. "No," he said firmly. "You're not taking it." The hunter's expression did not change, but its eyes flared brighter. "Then you have chosen death." Max barked furiously, lunging forward as the hunters spread out, circling the cabin. The child whimpered, clutching tighter to David's sleeve. David grabbed the fireplace poker with his free hand. It was no weapon against such beings, but it was all he had. The hunters moved closer. One reached out a long, clawed hand. David swung the poker hard, striking its arm. Sparks flew as metal clanged against something stronger than bone. The hunter staggered back, hissing with anger. The others closed in. "Run!" David shouted to the child, but the child shook its head, refusing to leave him. Instead, its body glowed brighter, silver light spilling from its skin. The hunters froze for a moment, their glowing eyes narrowing. David glanced at the child in shock. Its small hands trembled, but in its chest, a faint pulse of light shimmered, like a hidden crystal awakening. The hunters hissed again, this time with greed. "The crystal," one growled. "It carries the power. Take it alive." David realized then why they wanted the child. It was not about family or Kirit, it was about power. Whatever was inside this child was valuable, dangerous. The hunters would kill anyone to have it. His grip on the poker tightened. His choice was clear now. "You'll have to go through me first," he spat. The hunters lunged. Max leaped with a savage snarl, biting at one of their cloaks. David swung the poker again, blocking another strike. The room filled with chaos shadows, glowing light, growls, and shouts. The child's glow spread wider, filling the cabin with blinding silver radiance. For a moment, the hunters recoiled, shielding their eyes. David grabbed the child and pulled it close. "We're getting out," he whispered fiercely. He kicked the broken door aside and ran into the night, Max bounding ahead. The hunters shouted behind them, their voices echoing with fury. Beams of light shot across the forest, scanning wildly. David's legs burned as he ran, the child heavy in his arms, but he did not stop. The choice was made. He would protect the child, no matter the cost. As they vanished into the darkness of the forest, the child looked up at him with shining silver eyes. "Father," it whispered, though the word was broken and uncertain. David's chest tightened. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing: he had chosen his path, and there was no turning back. The forest swallowed them whole as David ran through the night. His lungs burned, his legs ached, but he did not stop. The alien child clung to his chest, glowing faintly, its silver eyes darting around in fear. Behind them, the hunters' voices carried through the trees, deep and cruel. Beams of light swept across the branches, searching, hunting. Max ran ahead, barking once to guide the way, then silent again, as if he knew sound could give them away. At last, David stumbled into a small clearing. He lowered the child to the ground, gasping for breath. The child's glow lit the grass in a circle around them. David crouched, trying to catch his breath, while Max circled nervously. Ears alert. The child looked up at him, lips trembling as it tried to speak. Its voice was weak, broken, but David leaned closer, desperate to understand. They kill for Crystal, the child whispered. David frowned, confused. Crystal. What crystal? The child touched its chest with small glowing fingers. For a moment, the light inside its body grew brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. David's eyes widened. He realized then the crystal was not a stone carried in its hands. It was part of the child itself, hidden inside, a living light within. What is it? David asked softly. Why are they after you? The child's eyes filled with tears. Power, it said slowly, struggling with each word. Crystal. Can. Destroy. Or save. David's chest tightened. He looked at the small, fragile being in front of him. This child carried something far beyond his understanding, something that entire armies might kill for. It explained the hunters' greed, their fury, their determination. They were not rescuers. They were predators, and this child was their prize. Max growled suddenly, ears pressed flat. The glow of lights flickered between the trees again, closer this time. David's heart pounded. They were still being tracked. He placed a hand on Max's back to steady him, then looked at the child again. You have to tell me, he whispered. What do I do? How do I keep you safe? The child blinked slowly, struggling to find the words. Trust. Heart, it said faintly. Not. Run forever. Must. Fight. The words sent a shiver through David. He was only a farmer, a man with a small cabin and an old dog. He had no weapons, no soldiers, no power. But the way the child looked at him with trust, with hope, made him feel stronger than he ever had before. Suddenly, a sharp whir filled the air. A drone zipped through the trees, its light scanning the clearing. David froze. The drone's beam landed on them, lighting up the child's glow like a beacon. The hunters' voices shouted in the distance. There, find it. David scooped the child into his arms again. We can't stay here, he muttered. He ran, Max at his heels, the drone buzzing above them. Branches slapped against his face, roots caught at his boots, but he pushed on. The child's glow flickered wildly, as if the crystal inside was waking. They broke through the trees and reached a rocky ridge. David skidded to a halt, nearly slipping on the edge. Below lay a river, dark and rushing fast. The drone circled overhead, its beam fixed on them. The hunters' shapes appeared in the distance, closing in. David looked down at the river, then back at the child. He had no time. Hold on, he whispered. Without another thought, he leaped. They crashed into the icy water. The current pulled hard, dragging them downstream. David held the child tightly against his chest, fighting to keep his head above the water. Max splashed beside them, swimming strong. The drone hovered at the edge of the cliff but could not follow. At last, the current spit them out onto a rocky bank. David coughed, shivering as he pulled himself and the child onto the shore. Max shook water from his fur, growling at the sky. The child's glow dimmed, its body weak again. But its eyes found David's, and in a trembling whisper, it spoke. Crystal. Awake soon. No hide. David frowned, wiping water from his face. What do you mean? The child clutched his shirt with surprising strength. Crystal. We'll choose, save, or destroy. They know. They fear. David sat in silence, the weight of those words sinking in. This was no ordinary child. It carried something that could change everything. He thought of the hunters' warning of their greed. If they got their hands on this crystal, what horrors would they unleash? The forest around them was quiet again, but David knew it was only for a moment. The hunters would not give up. They would keep coming until they had what they wanted. He looked at the child, then at Max, who stood guard beside them, eyes sharp. He had made his choice already. He would protect the child, no matter the danger. But now he understood the real battle was not about hiding. It was about standing against the hunters and the power they craved. The child leaned against him, breathing softly. Its glow flickered once more, brighter than before, as if preparing for something greater. David wrapped his arm around it, staring into the dark forest. "They want your crystal," he muttered, more to himself than to the child. "But if it can save instead of destroy, maybe that's what we're meant to do." And as the first light of dawn touched the trees, David realized the fight was only beginning. The first light of dawn touched the treetops, but the forest felt no safer. David sat on the rocky bank, his clothes soaked, his body aching from the river's pull. The alien child leaned against him, breathing softly, its glow faint but steady. Max paced nearby, growling low, his ears twitching at every sound. For a brief moment, David allowed himself to hope they had escaped. But the forest betrayed that hope with a sudden hum, low, steady, growing louder. His stomach tightened. The hunters were still searching. Their machines were tireless, and their voices of iron would not rest until they found the child. "We have to move," David whispered. He pushed himself to his feet, cradling the child in his arms. Max barked once, as if to agree. It led the way into the deeper woods. The forest was alive with shadows, the morning sun breaking through in sharp beams. Birds scattered at the sound of drones humming overhead. David kept to the thickest paths, ducking low beneath branches, his boots crunching softly on wet leaves. Every step was heavy, but his grip on the child never loosened. Behind them, the hunters' voices echoed. "Find it, the crystal must not be lost." David's pulse quickened. The child stirred, its silver eyes fluttering open. "They?" "Close," it whispered, its voice trembling. "I know," David muttered, his jaw tight. "But we'll get away." The glow from the child's body flickered brighter, lighting David's face. He looked down, startled. "What's happening?" The child clutched its chest. "Crystal. Waking can't hide long." Before David could respond, Max barked sharply and charged ahead. Through the trees, beams of white light swept across the ground. The hunters' drones had found them again. David ran, his legs burning, his breath ragged. The forest blurred around him as he pushed harder. Branches whipped across his arms, roots nearly tripped him, but he held on to the child with all his strength. Max stayed just ahead, guiding the way like a scout, his barking sharp and defiant. Suddenly, the ground dropped. David skidded to a halt at the edge of a deep ravine. The river below roared with foam and jagged rocks. He cursed under his breath. There was no safe way down. The drones closed in, buzzing like angry wasps. Their beams locked onto the glowing child, making them impossible to miss. David spun around. Through the trees, 3 hunters emerged, their cloaks trailing, their eyes glowing like fire. David's grip on the child tightened. His mind screamed for a plan, but none came. Then the child stirred again, lifting a trembling hand. Its glow surged, brighter than before, flooding the clearing with silver light. The hunters froze, shielding their eyes from the sudden brilliance. "Run?" the child gasped. David didn't hesitate. He sprinted along the edge of the ravine, searching for any path. Max ran beside him, barking furiously. Behind them, the hunters roared, their footsteps pounding the ground as they gave chase. They reached a fallen tree, bridging the ravine like a natural bridge. David's stomach-clenched tit was narrow, wet, and slick. One wrong step, and they would fall. But there was no other choice. He stepped onto the log, balancing carefully as the river roared far below. Each step felt like walking on a knife's edge. The child clung tightly to his chest, its glow flickering with fear. Max padded carefully across ahead of him, tail stiff. Halfway across, a drone swooped low, its buzzing sharp in David's ears. He ducked as its beam swept across him, nearly blinding him. He stumbled, almost losing his balance. The child cried out, and David steadied himself with a desperate lunge. Behind them, the hunters reached the edge of the ravine. One stepped onto the log, moving quickly, its glowing eyes fixed on the child. David's heart pounded. He was too slow; they would catch him before he crossed. The child pressed its glowing hand against David's chest. "Trust me," it whispered, before he could ask what it meant. The child's glow burst forth, a wave of silver light shooting across the log. The hunter staggered, blinded, its foot slipping on the slick wood. With a sharp cry, it plunged into the river below. Swallowed by the rushing water, David gasped, stunned, but kept moving. He reached the far side of the ravine and collapsed on the ground, clutching the child. Max barked triumphantly, wagging his tail. The child's glow dimmed again, its body weak. "Not forever," it whispered. "Crystal will burn me. If too much." David's throat tightened. He brushed damp hair from his face, staring into the trees beyond. They had escaped for now, but the hunters were not gone. Two still remained, and their machines would not stop. He held the child close, his resolve hardening. "We'll make it," he said firmly, more to himself than to the child. "We'll keep running until we find a way to fight back." The child looked up at him, silver eyes shining with fragile hope. "You." "Father," it whispered again, before closing its eyes in exhaustion. David sat in the forest, his arms wrapped around the small, glowing figure. Max lay beside them, ears twitching, guarding them with silent loyalty. The sun climbed higher, but the shadows of the hunters still pressed close. David knew the escape would not last forever. Sooner or later, the hunters would corner them again. And when that happened, the choice would no longer be to run. It would be to fight. The forest stretched endlessly, but David knew they could not keep running forever. His body ached, his clothes were torn, and his breath came in sharp bursts. The alien child rested weakly in his arms, its glow faint but pulsing like a heartbeat. Max trotted close by, growling at every sound, his fur bristling. The hunters' voices still echoed in the distance. Two remained, and they would not give up. Their machines scanned the land. Their footsteps shook the ground. David could feel them closing in. Every second felt like borrowed time. He stopped near a rocky hill, hidden by tall pines. His chest heaved as he looked around. There was no way forward. If they kept running, the hunters would catch them eventually. The child stirred in his arms, its silver eyes opening slowly. "No. Run," it whispered, barely strong enough to speak. "Must stand." David looked down at the fragile being, at the glowing light inside its chest. The words from before came back to him: "The crystal can destroy or save." He realized then that the child was right. Running was over. The only way to protect it was to face the hunters here. No matter the cost. He set the child gently on the ground near a large stone. Max stayed by its side, ears sharp, tail stiff, ready to defend. David picked up a heavy branch, the closest thing to a weapon he could find. It felt small and useless against the power of the hunters, but he gripped it tightly anyway. The hum came first, then the shadows. The last two hunters stepped into the clearing, their tall frames glowing faintly in the dim morning light. Their eyes burned like yellow fire as they scanned the hill. One raised a long arm, pointing at the child. "There," it growled. "The crystal." At last, David stepped forward, blocking their path. His heart pounded so hard it hurt, but his voice was steady. "You'll have to go through me." The hunters hissed, their cloaks shifting. "Foolish human," one said coldly. "You will die for something you cannot control." David raised the branch. "Maybe, but I won't let you take it." The hunters lunged. The ground shook under their weight. David swung hard, striking the first across its arm. The branch snapped, but the blow made the hunter stumble. Max barked furiously and leaped at the second, biting its cloak, pulling it off balance. The child cried out, its glow suddenly blazing brighter. Silver light poured from its small body, spreading across the clearing like a wave. The hunters shielded their eyes, roaring in anger. David dropped the broken branch and ran forward, tackling one of the hunters with all his strength. They crashed to the ground, the hunter thrashing with sharp claws. David gritted his teeth, fighting with bare hands, holding it down as best he could. The second hunter kicked Max aside, sending him yelping into the dirt. David shouted in rage, but before the hunter could strike, the child stood tall, glowing so bright it was blinding. The silver light pulsed like a heartbeat, growing stronger and stronger. The hunters froze, their glowing eyes wide with sudden fear. "No!" one roared. "The crystal, stop it." But it was too late. The child raised its small hands, and the light erupted in a burst that shook the earth. A wave of energy surged outward, throwing the hunters back. Their bodies crackled with sparks as the silver light engulfed them. With one final scream, they dissolved into dust, their cloaks burning away into nothing. The forest fell silent. The hum of drones vanished. The hunters were gone. David lay on the ground, gasping for air, his body shaking from exhaustion. Max limped back to his side, growling weakly but alive. David reached out and hugged the dog, relief flooding through him. Then he turned to the child. The glow was fading, its silver eyes dim. It swayed on its feet, trembling. David rushed to catch it, holding it close. "Stay with me," he whispered desperately. "You're safe now." The child smiled faintly, its hand pressing against his chest. "Safe. Because of you," it whispered. "You, Father." David's throat tightened. He felt tears burn his eyes. He had lost so much in life, lived so long in loneliness. But in this moment, holding this fragile child, he felt something he thought he would never feel again. Family. Above them, the sky shifted. Through the clouds, a bright light appeared, not from the hunters, but from another ship. Sleek, silver, and calm, it descended slowly, bathing the forest in gentle light. The child's silver eyes widened with recognition. "My people," it whispered. David looked up, torn between relief and sorrow. He knew this was the moment the child would leave. He had protected it, fought for it, but it belonged to another world. The ship landed softly, its door opening with a warm glow. Figures stepped out tall, gentle, their eyes the same silver as the child's. They looked at David with gratitude. One bowed deeply, speaking in a language he could not understand. But the meaning was clear. "Thank you." The child hugged him tightly, tears glowing on its cheeks. "Never forget," it whispered. It pressed something small and glowing into his hand, a fragment of the crystal, warm and alive. "For you." David's eyes blurred with tears as the child stepped away, walking into the light of the ship. Max whined softly, watching. The ship's door closed, and slowly it lifted into the sky. David stood there, the crystal glowing in his palm, his heart heavy but full. The forest was quiet again, but he knew nothing would ever be the same as the ship disappeared among the stars. One bright light lingered in the sky, glowing stronger than the rest. David smiled faintly, whispering to himself, "Goodbye, my child." And deep inside, he knew their bond would never be broken.